Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 18th edition of Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales. I started this probably when I was 10 years old. Nobody believes that. So uh, we have a sponsor this year, Journal of Educators Online. And if you're not familiar with it, check it out. It's a peer-reviewed publication. Articles touch on exactly the kind of things we're going to talk about today. And we'll have the editor also do a session for us, who's participated several times over the years. Um, so we have me juggling multiple computers, and we have with us Terry Doyle. And if I can get to it, Terry. I can't. Terry is an emeritus professor from Ferris State. And where's Ferris State, Terry? Michigan? Is that right?
Yeah, Big Rapids, Michigan.
Okay. Uh, while he was there, he's senior instructor for faculty development and professor of reading and learning disabilities. He's worked with like a zillion faculty and over 200 campuses around the world, and he's given many keynote addresses. Therefore, we're really uh, thankful for him taking time to uh, present with us. He's authored or co-authored uh, 7 books dealing with the learner-centered approach to teaching and students learning. And he's currently the CEO of Learner Centered Tutoring. And that's info.learnercenteredtutoring.com. And this session is to talk about the most current research about how the brain learns and forms memories. Terry, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Hope you are enjoying your day. This presentation was developed not only by myself, but by Michael Doyle, who's the Chief Administrator of Learner-Centered Tutoring. And it's a presentation that we give to students a great deal. And when I'm done today, if you would like these slides to show to your students, that will be just great. We hope to pass this information on to as many learners as we possibly can. We're going to start with the whole concept of preparing the brain for learning, something that unfortunately many learners don't have any clue about. They kind of think they should get out of bed and head to class, and the teacher will do the work and they'll participate if they want, not really understanding that to optimize their learning, they really need to do 4 things that are involved with the preparation of the brain. They are hydration, having a proper diet, getting exercise, and of course, getting appropriate amounts of sleep. We're going to start with hydration. The simple fact is that the brain doesn't work very well when it's dehydrated. The water that we drink and take in through our food and other ways is the key to the producing of the hormones and the neurotransmitters that the brain needs to communicate. We need to understand that when we sleep at night and wake up in the morning, we're probably about 2 pounds lighter than we were when we went to bed, simply through losing the water through normal respiration processes. So what that means for a learner is that they need to rehydrate when they get up in the morning. These studies out of the University of Connecticut found that even mild dehydration alters a person's mood, energy level, and the ability to think clearly. Three things that are crucial to any learner's situation. When you become dehydrated, the first thing that happens in the brain is that the brain cells lose efficiency. What that means is that they can't operate anywhere near their optimum level, which is going to impair the taking in of new information and the ability to recall that information. We lose about 80 ounces of water during the day, so it's crucial for learners to continue to hydrate throughout the day. These are the symptoms that you'll notice sometimes in your students when they are in fact dehydrated. I taught school for 45 years, 38 at Ferris State. And over that time, I probably had 8 to 10 students who fainted in class. It turns out that every single one of them fainted because they were dehydrated. So it's a thing that can happen to students, and we simply need to make them aware. First thing in the morning, the body needs somewhere between 12 and 16 ounces of water in order to rehydrate itself. That can come in multiple forms: coffee, tea, milk, juice, all kinds of different ways. It's not ideal to have sodas or energy drinks, but at least they produce liquids for the body. The other thing that you've heard probably 1,000 times is somehow somebody thought we needed to drink 8 glasses of water each day. What we really need to do is drink when we're thirsty. If you're older like myself, unfortunately, the brain loses as we age the ability to sense that it's becoming dehydrated. So it's important for people of older ages to pay attention to consuming throughout the day the kinds of water, coffee, tea, milk, etc., that they need to stay hydrated. Okay, so the message for the students is simple. The brain that is dehydrated has a great deal of difficulty learning new things and recalling memories from what have already been learned. So that's number one. Number two is our students need to understand that the brain has to have a diet that's balanced, and it has to have food throughout the day. The neurons that fire in our brains to help us create the new learning are living cells. They have a metabolism and they need glucose in order to function. So for students, we want them to understand that glucose is the fuel for their brain, much like gasoline is the fuel for their car, although today there are certain electrical vehicles out there. Because the neurons in our brain can't store glucose, it's necessary for the bloodstream to deliver a constant supply of this fuel. That can only occur if our students are consuming food throughout the day, and especially having breakfast before they head off to their learning environments. The supply in the form of blood sugar is contained from a balanced diet. And we'll look here and see that adding too much sugar to your diet, which is unfortunately a common kind of thing, especially among students in high schools and colleges, it actually reduces the production of BDNF, which is the protein that underlies all learning in the brain. One of the most important aspects of learning is the production of BDNF. And sugary drinks, like we're looking at in this picture, actually reduce that production. So without BDNF, our brains can't form new memories and can't learn or remember much of anything. Unfortunately, sleep deprivation also causes the body to be less efficient in terms of how it's able to deal with the food intake and get the glucose that it needs for continued learning. So for learners, the research is pretty clear. Not only what they eat, but when they eat becomes a huge benefit to their cognitive development and their ability of them to learn and remember what it is that we're teaching them. The third thing is sleep. Take a look at this, if you would, for a moment. Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment. Makes you live longer, enhances your memory, makes you more creative. It makes you look attractive, keeps you slim, lowers your body cravings, protects you from cancer, dementia, wards off colds and flu. It lowers your risk of heart attack, stroke, not to mention diabetes, and you'll even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. And of course, the answer to that is it's sleep. Sleep is one of the most studied areas of all the kinds of things that we study related to human health and development as well as learning. Teenagers need about 9 to 10 hours of sleep, adults about 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So what happens to you when you don't get enough sleep? Well, even one day of a lack of getting the 7 to 9 hours that a person needs impairs their ability to pay attention, actually makes them more irritable, has difficulty recalling the information that they need. It makes especially teenagers and young adults more impulsive. It slows our reaction time, and unfortunately, it depresses our immune system. This is something that I put into this slide presentation because it's such a big deal, especially for young people, 16-year-old, just learning to drive, through college students who sometimes are a little more impulsive as their brain hasn't fully matured until we get now, they're saying late into our 20s. A person dies every hour in a car crash related to sleep loss. These
Terry,
crashes
Terry,
are,
we're not
yes,
seeing your slides.
you're not seeing the slides.
Right.
Right, just, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I stopped screen sharing because all they were seeing was still image of me, which is pretty boring. But you were sharing your desktop, but you weren't showing slides.
Can you see it now?
Ah, here we go.
Yes?
Yep. Okay, we're good.
I'm sorry. Just imagine all these great slides you would have seen. Really well done. Can you see that right now? Car crashes?
Yes,
Yes?
indeed. Looks nasty.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's continue. Hopefully this will be not an issue the rest of the way. The other part of sleep, and you probably already know this, sleep is when we make memories. Sleep is when the brain refreshes itself in order to learn new things the next day. It is absolutely the key for students to be able to learn and remember when you have them in class. Students who are sleep deprived are so deficient in their capacity to learn that it may as well be at home sleeping. Okay, so there's two kinds of sleep, REM sleep and non-REM sleep. The brain does different things during both of those periods. During non-REM sleep, it makes memories for the new factual information that it's taken in during the day. During REM sleep is when it consolidates memories. New information is then consolidated with prior knowledge, forming new understandings, hopefully solving problems. And one of the most exciting things I learned about this in my work is that it practices new motor skills. So someone who's learning to play a musical instrument or a new athletic skill, this actually gets practiced over and over. Sometimes they estimate as much as 1,000 times during REM sleep. There's a study that shows that pianists who are working on a particular performance found after a night's sleep, they actually played better than they did the night before. So what else do we know about sleep? We know that caffeine, unfortunately, interferes with sleep. When we are ready to go to sleep, there are two things that are happening. One of them is that during the day, our bodies produce a constant source of adenosine. Adenosine is the chemical that puts us to sleep and keeps us asleep. Unfortunately, caffeine interrupts that process, blocking the sleepiness signal. The half-life of caffeine is about 5 to 7 hours, so we need to be careful. Students need to learn that if they take in caffeine while they're studying at night, they're very likely to disrupt their sleep patterns. The other thing that disrupts sleep patterns, unfortunately for anyone, is alcohol. Alcohol, when we metabolize it, creates two chemicals, aldehydes and ketones, which unfortunately block the brain's ability to generate REM sleep. I just mentioned REM sleep is when we produce the consolidation of memories that are crucial to new learning. So what else do we know? We know that naps are really good for us. The newest research suggests that naps of about 90 minutes are ideal to really refresh ourselves and restore our cognitive sets. If we can't do 90, the research suggests that 20 minutes is a good amount of time. Naps that happen between those two areas, if you awake, can cause you to feel pretty groggy for quite some time. So sleep, hydration, food, and the last one is for brain preparation is exercise. Okay. Natural selection developed a human brain to solve problems of survival in outdoor unstable environments while in almost constant motion, which means we are a species that has to move to learn. That's something that many schools and colleges simply do not grasp in the way that they should. The advantage that the brain has when it's moving is that it is literally shaped and sharpened by this movement. We require constant, regular movement in all kinds of forms in order to optimize our brain's learning. If exercise were a drug that could do for human health, or if there were a drug that could do for human health, which exercise can, it would be probably the best pharmaceutical that was ever invented. So let's look at this. When you engage in exercise, especially aerobic level exercise where you get your heart beating, it causes the brain to be able to pay better attention. It causes the brain to allocate more cognitive resources to the task, and it causes the brain to be able to concentrate for longer periods of time. And the reason for this is that it produces certain neurochemicals. Exercise is simply one of the most important things a person can do to improve their learning. Okay, so let's look at this. When you exercise, it directly stimulates the prefrontal cortices of the brain, which we all know are the part of the brain that has to deal with our cognitive processing. Okay, so what happens here is that exercise enhances the brain's ability to focus, concentrate, organize, and plan, four crucial elements of the learning process. In addition, exercise produces more noradrenaline, serotonin, and dopamine, three neurotransmitters that are key elements of being motivated to learn, having the patience to stay on task, to be more optimistic, and to pay attention not only better, but for longer periods of time. So exercise triggers in the brain a process that actually dramatically enhances the ability of the brain to learn. Studies also show that following exercise, problem-solving ability, memory, and attention all improve. In addition, one of the most powerful things that happens during exercise is the brain produces more BDNF. This is the protein I just mentioned that underlies all human learning. BDNF is what enhances the wiring of neurons, which underlies our learning. This is one of the greatest benefits of exercise. As I mentioned before, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Without it, basically the brain struggles to learn anything new. Okay? It also, by the way, improves brain health. It's a stress inoculator, and it makes our brain cells more resilient to be able to fight off disease. So those are the four things that students need to know most about preparing their brain for learning. Unfortunately, most of those have no control from the teacher's side of the desk. We need to share this information with them. We need to keep them reminded that these are the things they need to be doing in order to improve and optimize their memory. One of the things that the message that I like to make here is if you're teaching in a high school, this is where PE becomes a really important course, as opposed to something that we used to look at as, oh my God, we got to go to PE. So there's a lot of things here that schools and colleges need to recognize. So let's move on and talk about the research on memory formation. Number
We're not
one.
seeing your slides. You're not changing your slides.
Say that again.
You're not changing your slides. Sorry. We're still looking at carpet.
Yeah, I am. Well, then I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on because I'm changing my slides right in front of me.
Yeah, now we're seeing slides full screen. Good, good.
Sorry, just a minute. Go back. So you can see this slide.
Now we see just your name. You had it a moment ago where you showed slide full screen. You probably got director view, something like that.
You see this?
Nope, just you, your name.
Great. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Try sharing your screen again. I think you stopped sharing it.
Can you see this?
Yes, but that's there you go.
There you go. Leave it at that. Just switch slides. Good.
So you saw the next slide now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. I thought everything was fine. You should have told me much sooner. Okay, so let's go back and talk about memory. You can all see this slide now?
Yes. Attention is crucial.
Okay. So anyway, let's begin by understanding that attention, which every teacher knows is the key element of any learning process, is even more important than most students understand. And the reason is that the neural networks that the brain forms when it learns something new become the exact same neural networks for that memory. In other words, whatever the student puts into their brain during class is what the brain is going to use when it tries to remember that information and consolidate it with other information, which means paying attention in class is perhaps the number one thing that's going to determine how well they're able to remember that information later on. So the message to students is they need to be more elaborately encoding the information, especially if they can attach some kind of emotional connection to that information that enhances the brain's ability to hang on to that information. In terms of cramming, which many students, including myself at times in my life, the research is pretty clear that cramming can in fact get you a better score on your exam than you certainly would have gotten without cramming. However, from the standpoint of remembering that information and hanging on to it, it's a completely irrational behavior. The brain only hangs on to that information for a short period of time. We know that the brain learns best when that information is distributed over a time period and continually practiced. So here are the 5 rules students need to know about improving memory. Repetition over time or distributive practice. And one of the reasons that distributive practice is so powerful is that sleep takes place between the practice sessions. The second reason that distributive practice is powerful is that it allows the student to understand what do they remember and what do they still need to work on. So by pushing this over 3 days, 5 days, 8 days, they become much more aware of what's sticking with them and what they need to spend more time on. Second one, elaboration, is the more ways in which a student uses their information, the more pathways are created in the brain. So if they read it, write it, think about it, talk to others about it, make drawings of it, every single one of those elaborations results in a different memory pathway, meaning they have 5 or 6 or 7 different ways to retrieve that information rather than just one. Third thing is, we know that the brain only makes memories for those things that are important. We as learners have to communicate to our brain what it is we want it to remember. What does that mean? It means the actions that we take by studying, practicing, thinking, writing, reading, etc., are all messages to the brain that this information is something that's important to us and we want to remember it. That's how we communicate what it is that the brain should hang on to. Number 4 is that practice is most efficient when we actually recall information from memory, like using note cards. Every time you recall a piece of information from memory, that information gets stronger and faster to recall in the future. And number 5 is similar to elaboration number 2, is the more senses that you use in your studying and in your learning, the more memory pathways you create, as well as the greater chance you have of connecting the new information to prior knowledge that was learned either visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, etc., etc. So study cards, note cards, anything that causes the student to have to recall the information, pull it back out of memory, is considered one of the best possible ways to study. Okay. Why do students forget? Well, if we take a look at Donald Schachter's book, which he's just updated after about 20 years, The 7 Sins of Memory, he says number 1 for students is basically test anxiety. It's blocking. It's the information is there, but they can't access it. That can be because they're dehydrated. That can be because they're sleep deprived. That can be because of the anxiety that they're feeling over the test situation. The second one is that the student attributes the memory to the wrong situation or source. This often happens to students as they progress through college and they, as a major in a particular area, they start taking courses that have similar content. A student who's enrolled both in chemistry, physics, and math at the same time runs the risk of misattribution. And the third thing is they simply don't study. Transience, which he calls memory lost over time, is really the result of the fact that because they didn't put in the time and effort to implant that information into their long-term memory, it is not available to them when they need it. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. Excuse me. Do you know the lyrics to songs that you do not want to know and you never tried to learn? Okay. I have 2 grandchildren, 8 and 4, but when they were a little bit younger, they were obsessed with Baby Shark. And I became, unfortunately, obsessed without wanting to the music of Baby Shark. Why did that happen? Because it was on their screens and on the TV all the time when they would visit. The power of repetition is extraordinary. We know the entire lyrics for songs that we never tried to learn. We never studied these information. We never took tests on this information, yet we know it perfectly. The only drawback to repetition is that it doesn't translate necessarily to meaning. I can recall the exact words of a poem I memorized in college that was done in Greek. I have no idea what any of it means because I never translated. The point is, repetition is powerful for memory, but it does not necessarily connect to meaning. So, what strategies will improve the student's learning and memory? Number 1 is that the more senses they use, the more pathways they create. We are incredibly powerful visual learners. Why are we powerful visual learners? Because evolution made us that way. As you see on the screen here, if you didn't see the predators, sometimes you didn't survive the day. If you didn't see the food you were hunting, you starved to death. If you didn't see a safe place to live for protection, you weren't be able to survive. So survival was tied so powerfully to vision that Medina says in his Brain Rules book, it is the most powerful sensory process that we use in learning. So of course, auditory is right up there as well. The other thing students may not know is that there's a tremendous connection between the smell of something and the memory of that information. Just ask yourself this: have you ever just kind of walked into a store or a bakery or a building, got a whiff of something, and then suddenly were transported back to a memory? This happened to me and a friend of mine in Chicago. I went into his old apartment building, and I swear I was back in my grandparents' apartment on Christmas Eve when I was 4 years old. Smell is a very powerful cue for remembering information, and students should take advantage of that. The other thing we know from John Rady's work, the Harvard psychiatrist, is that the brain does basically everything in patterns. From a teacher's standpoint, this is one of the most important things teachers need to understand about the pedagogical approaches that they use. The brain works in patterns. So if you can introduce to the student the pattern, the organization of the information, you make it much easier for them to learn and remember. Let me show you an example. I'm going to show you 2 slides. I just want to ask you which slide you think would be easier to remember. Here's the first one. Here's the second one. I'm going to say that you think the second one is easier to remember than the first one. How come? It's a pattern. It's a phone number. It's a pattern we've seen thousands of times in our lives. If we go back to slide 1, this is a random set of 10 numbers. It's not a big number. It's not a phone number. It doesn't carry any specific meaning. It is much harder for students to learn your content when they don't see the patterns that connect that content up to their own backgrounds. So by sticking it into patterns, these are the most familiar patterns that students have for learning. They've been using them literally since preschool and before. Similarity and difference, cause and effect, comparison and contrast. And then the one that in many ways is the most powerful is simply putting things into their own words. Let me show you. Dunlowski and his colleagues investigated 10 different learning strategies. And the one finding that was consistent across all of them is that when the learners put their information into their own words, it resulted in better learning. And here's a demonstration, because I was a reading teacher for many, many years, so vocabulary was part of our course. And this is what I would teach my students to do. The definition of exploitation from the dictionary is on my left part of this slide. It's the act of selfishly taking advantage of someone or a group of people in order to profit for them, otherwise benefit oneself. Or it's 24 words. But if you learn as a student to translate that information into your own words, a good definition would be benefiting by unfairly taking advantage of someone else. 8 words, okay? When students are able to make up their own examples, when students are able to translate concepts into their own words, they're demonstrating a significant understanding of what's going on. From a teacher's standpoint, those questions, when you ask a student, can you give me an example? Can you put that into your own words? You're using one of the most powerful teaching tools that you have available to yourself. Lastly, we're going to talk about what interferes with learning. Well, the number one thing for many students is that they try to multitask, especially in today's world of social media, telephones, iPhones, screens, etc., etc., etc. Multitasking decreases almost all of our mental resources needed for new learning and study. Okay. For example, this study found that the brain's activation in areas needed for new learning is much less when it's multitasking than when there's a single task. In other words, the brain's ability to apply its cognitive resources when we're focused on a single task is much greater than we're being diverted our attention to multiple tasks. One of the things that's brand new in the research is that listening to music that has a certain beat, 60 to 70 beats per minute, an example of that is Baroque music, soft, gentle music, while studying actually enhances memory formation. This is because one of the newest findings about the human brain is that the brain actually learns through rhythms. It actually learns through the different kinds of brain waves that exist, the beta and theta and gamma waves that exist in the brain. If you're interested in that, at the end of this conference, February 20th, I'm doing a presentation all about how brain waves work and how they are the powerful source that actually runs the learning and thinking processes of the brain. So here's the review of what we've talked about today. I apologize again that you didn't see all my slides, but let's walk through this. Sleep is crucial to academic success on almost all levels. Physical health of the student, the brain health of the student, the ability of the student to learn, the ability of the student to form memories and to retrieve those memories. You can't remind the students any more often than every single day about the power of sleep. I used to ask my students, I had freshmen, first semester freshmen in my reading class, how much sleep did you get last night? It didn't take 30 seconds to go around the room. All they had to say is the number of hours, 8, 10. So I would get answers from 0 to 17 hours of sleep. So somebody was making up for some lost time. Number 2 is the more they can integrate exercise into their lives, the better their physical health will be, their emotional and mental health will be, but the more powerful their brain's learning abilities will be. Staying hydrated and eating a balanced diet is crucial. Otherwise, they're really just sabotaging their own learning by not paying attention to these basic things. Number 4, using multiple senses in learning. 2 powerful things about that is when we process information through multiple senses, we make more memory pathways for it. And secondly, we open up the opportunities to connect to prior knowledge in more than one particular way. That's why teaching using multiple senses is so important. While we have visual information and auditory information and tactile information, one of the most interesting things that's happening now in K-12 education is they're returning to handwriting. They're going back to cursive. And the reason they're going back to cursive is that the process of actually tactily holding a pencil and kinesthetically moving your hand and thinking about and reading and processing that information through that process actually results in much better remembering and learning of that information. We should have never moved away from cursive. Number 5, patterns are everywhere. We want to teach through patterns. We want to help students recognize the patterns that exist within the information. For example, if you're teaching mathematics, when you're introducing a new problem, you really want to show these are all the things that are the same in the patterns of other problems we've done. This is what's new. Okay, here's the pattern, here's what's new. Number 6, retrieval of information from memory and studying is key. Recall it from your brain. Get those note cards developed. Question on one side, answer on the other. Number 7, use a distributed practice. We talked a lot about the power of distributed practice over time. Don't multitask. Don't listen to TV or text or scroll on your phone while you're studying. And lastly, paying attention is the key. So that's what I have to share with you today. So if you have questions for me or comments or something you'd like to share, I'm open to that. Sorry about the slides. I'll try to do better on February 20th.
No, I'll ask you something about, you're talking about exercise. And so does that mean classrooms should replace chairs and desks with like Stairmasters and rowing machines?
Well, you'll notice if you kind of look around on the research, you'll find that a lot of physical buildings, classrooms have been altered to include opportunities for students to move around. There's an example of at the University Community College in Houston where they put mini bicycles under all the tables. So a student can actually just pedal away while they're doing their work. So there are options to do things like that. The number one thing I would suggest that I did in my own teaching is walking discussion groups. If the building you're in allows for that, I used to give my students the questions, send them out for 20 minutes to walk around campus and come back with the questions answered, which the first time I did it, I was afraid they wouldn't come back. So I followed them. And of course, they didn't walk. They went around the corner and sat on the couches. But once I chased them away, they actually came to like that experience. Okay? And it didn't really change how effective my time usage was. They came back. They were actually more energized. So I think there's some opportunities there to do things.
I see Aaron asked about getting a copy of your slides. Terry, if you send them to me, I will post them on the schedule. Just like it says more, then it'll say PDF or slides, and they can download it from there. That's okay.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I'm excited if they want to use these slides with their own students. I think it's like I said, I've given this presentation, I don't know, 50, 60 times to student groups, and they seem to be pretty responsive. Any other questions?
Yeah, let's see. Has there been a study with using students with different neurological diversities?
I'm sure there have been, but not that I am personally aware of. But the processes that I'm talking about are pretty consistent across anybody's brain processing. You know, the brains tend to work pretty much in similar fashions. One of the first things I usually tell people in some of my presentations is, as unique as we are as humans, at the level of neurons, we all learn exactly the same way. Everybody's brains learn exactly the same way at the level of how cellular function takes place and how brain waves work. Okay, anything else? I'll be happy to share the slides. Thanks for your patience. I apologize for my lack of technical skills. I'll have to work on that. Thanks for listening.
Terry, thank you for taking time to share this with us. And folks, if you want slides, look, just certainly by the end of the day, they'll be there, more likely sooner than that. So I thank you. At top of the hour, we have another session. I hope to see most of you there. So, Terry, thank you very much. I'm going to end the session.
Yep, bye now.